All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Jacqueline Terrassa. I am the Carolyn Muzzy director here at the Colby Museum, and I'm just elated that all of you are here. More people are coming for this afternoon, and it is such a pleasure to be together in community, to celebrate art, to celebrate artists, and to celebrate being together and what is possible when we do that. So at the Colby Museum, one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about is the role of place. We are here in central Maine, and that has always been a factor in our history. It is definitely a factor in our present and everything that is happening here, specifically in Waterville. And it is also very important that we are part of Colby College. That is central to our mission. And then fundamentally, it is also important that we are in the homelands of the Wabanaki, the Maliseet, the Mi'kmaq, the Passamaquoddy, and the Penobscot. And these communities, these people have really stewarded these lands, their cultures for millennia. And our commitment as a museum is to continually support artists who are making work today from these communities and other indigenous communities to really make a place for the teaching and the learning and the making of art history that comes from an indigenous point of view, and to really, as a museum, finding ways to make an effort to repair and to create better futures together. And one of our commitments is expressed in the exhibition that is on view, Painted Our Bodies, Hearts, and Village, and you will learn more about that today as one of the exhibitions that gives occasion to this panel. And here on view is a wonderful work by the artist Sarah Sakbison, who would have been here, but she's working on a project somewhere else, and who has been crucial in advising the museum and creating this wonderful work that is now in our collection. We begin today with a program conversation. We will then have lots of time to be together with each other in our galleries, to also then move over for a reception and lunch, and then more time to be at the museum. So before we sort of dive into our conversation, I wanted to give you a kind of 1-minute walkthrough of some of the things that are in view at the museum, because you are here to be with art as well as with each other, and I want you to have a sense of what is up on view in addition to what is on the screen. So here you have the work on the to my left of Fred Wilson, who we honor today with the Cummings Award for Artistic Excellence. And to the right is a work that is exhibited nearby, and it is by the artist Yvonne Jacquet. And Yvonne Jacquet passed away this spring. It is a work that certainly centered me when I started working here at the museum. It's an aerial view of the town of Skowhegan, which is only half an hour away, and a place where the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture calls it its home. Some say it's in Madison, but that's all right. But anyway, I honor Yvonne today because she would have been here. In the shop wing, we have completely reinstalled that wing after the presentation of Alex Katz's Theater and Dance. Now on view is a selection from among the 900 works that we have in our collection of Alex Katz, and is presented around the theme of repetitions and how Alex uses this approach to presenting and creating work. Our Jetty galleries, these are just 2 examples of works on view in our Jetty galleries. We are centering the collection. And upstairs is really a look at the last 50 years of transformational gifts that have come in different ways from the 19th century to the present. And then also downstairs is an exhibition that looks at the kind of long 1980s and the role of the personal and the political in that time period. You should not miss a wonderful exhibition curated by David Park-Curry, Whistler, Streetscapes, Urban Change, on view in our Davis Gallery, and it's a fraction of the collection of about 300 works that we have, thanks to Peter and Paul Lunder in the Lunder collection. It's an exquisite exhibition, very interesting in terms of the questions that we asked today about changing cities and changing towns and changing landscapes. And then finally, the exhibition that I mentioned, Painted Our Bodies, Hearts, and Village, in addition to much more on view in our collection galleries. And we are delighted to have Virgil Ortiz here, who designed this exhibition. But that is not all. We also have here Jill Alberg-Yohe and Juan Lucero, who I'm not sure has arrived quite yet here in the room, but he will be here, and Sierra Height, who were co-curators of this exhibition with many members of the museum team, and importantly, a council of Wabanaki and Pueblo advisors who were crucial, and the research support and involvement of exhibition artists, of Lunder Institute fellows, other scholars, curators, partners who have made this possible. That exhibition will be on view for a year as a collection installation, and after a symposium in November, we will publish, we will make a book of this project that will be released next spring. So I'll come to Paula and another exhibition that is on view in a moment. We have, again, three great artists here. We have Daniel Minter, we have Virgil Ortiz, and we have Paula Wilson. And in very different ways, these artists respond to the conditions and histories and possibilities of places, the places they call home, the media that they call home. And they use their art and their creative power to really open up spaces not only for their own work, but also for the work of other artists and other creative people and people in general to reflect and to think and to see past and present. So the other exhibition that provided an occasion for today's program is Ashley Bryan, Paula Wilson, Take the World into Your Arms, which was curated by Jennifer Gross, who is here in the room. And it brings together these two artists, Paula Wilson and Ashley Bryan, two artists from completely different generations, and yet eclectic in their media and sharing an approach, an incredibly humanistic and even spiritual approach to the question of making art and the question of their relationship to the world. That is on view in our Joan Digman Schmaltz Gallery, and that is the museum's new gallery downtown at the Paul J. Schuff Art Center, and I urge you to stop by this wonderful art center, which I will mention this afternoon. This week, Ashley Bryan would have been 100 years old. And he passed away last year at the ripe young age of 98. But it's so important to bring him in the room. And this was a suggestion, actually, that both Daniel and Paula had. Ashley Bryan fell in love with Maine when he was one of in the earliest class at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. And after teaching for many years at Dartmouth, after becoming an incredibly well-regarded children's book illustrator and artist and author of children's book and performer and reciter of poetry, which he loved, he settled in Little Cranberry Island off the coast of Maine and continued to inspire so many people here and much beyond Maine. So
I grew up in New York City, born in Harlem, raised in the Bronx. And in elementary school, kindergarten, we made our first books. As we learned the alphabet, we did pictures for each letter. And when we reached letter Z, the teacher gave us construction paper. We sewed the pages together. She said, "You've just published an alphabet book. You are the author, the illustrator, the binder. Take it home. You are the distributor as well." Now, I brought that book home. I got so much praise for it. I could hardly wait to go back to kindergarten and publish more books. When we learned the numbers, we did pictures for each number, sewed it together, a numbers book. Learned to spell words, boy, cat, hat, box, block. We sewed it together with a word book. And so I continued making books from kindergarten on. I've never stopped. All through the years, I've made books as gifts, as presents for family and friends. And I continued that into college, taking a course in book illustration as well. But it had always been a part of my life as an artist, drawing and painting and making the little books as gifts.
So that's Ashley Bryan. And I want to, with that origin story, how he began as an artist, I want to turn to our artists here in the room, and I'll start with you, Daniel. I'm interested in your origin story. You grew up in Georgia, Southwest Georgia, and you are now in Maine. You've been living here for about 20 years after traveling in many places and doing projects in many places, studying illustration. You two have launched a children's book festival and many other things, but where did things begin for you and how did you begin to think of yourself as an artist?
Thank you. The earliest memories I have of actual creating art is from before I began going to school. I would sit out in the yard and draw on the ground in the dirt with a stick. That's the first drawing surface. And the first things I would draw were the cows that would come up to the fence, and look at me as I was working. And so I would draw the cows, sit on the ground and draw the cows. And I never really stopped. But at that time, I was not thinking of myself as an artist. I didn't begin thinking of myself as an artist until much later, until really I could do something for other people. Mm-hmm. Do a service of art or do some type of thing that other people needed. To create something for someone else. Then I began to think that maybe this is a function that is useful to other people as well.
And I'm wondering if that was the case. For instance, this is one of your illustrations for the book Black Food by Brian Terry, and this is a very recent piece. So how many years before this moment was that sort of shift for you of doing things for other people?
Well, I began doing things for other people, in the small town where I grew up. I would do things for them. But professionally, I've always done things for people. And this piece that you're looking at really represents more of a mixture of the expression of myself where I'm from in answering the question that Brian Terry put to me. He was asking me to create something that embodied spirit and food. And we had a long conversation, and really I just worked from creating things from my roots. And thinking about food as nourishment, yes, but as spiritual nourishment as well. The things that the practices, the practice of collecting, the practice of serving people. That's what built the creation of this piece. Many levels.
That's beautiful. And as you're talking, this is why these three artists are together, because the kind of overlaps, relationships, and how you think about your work is just remarkable, and their differences. And Paula, I'm wondering for you grew up in Chicago, and eventually you went to school in St. Louis, you were in New York, and then you made your way to Carrizozo, New Mexico, which I had the privilege of visiting, you and Mike Lack, who is here and often a collaborator of yours. And there you have established not just a studio and a home for you to make work, but really you're beginning to build you've been building a community there, establishing an artist residency program and other kinds of things there. And I'm just wondering for you, where did it all kind of begin to come together?
Yeah, I appreciate that starting as a child, right? Because I think for so many of us, it's a continuum. There isn't this one moment where oh yes, now I'm an artist. And I appreciate the way kids tend to kind of believe in themselves as artists. I was just imagining you drawing the cows and thinking about how maybe that was the fact that you didn't even know that you were doing plein air painting and potentially when we think about a children's drawing of a cow, it would be almost like a pin art version of it. And I'm picturing you with how many eyes that you have in your work, this idea of looking back. Just I'm just interested, or in my mind, I'm imagining these drawings were sort of pre-knowledge, this ability to kind of tap into something. And in a walkthrough I was giving yesterday, I was remembering somebody asked a question. It made me remember my mom would put these giant pieces of paper up into in a kind of area where we could paint. And I was like, is that where I got my interest in kind of working at a large scale? Did it happen in these moments? So, but at one point I did go to Interlochen, which is an art camp, mainly a music camp, but I went for visual art. And that's definitely when I was like, I found my passion. Particularly around the print shop, I felt like there was something very communal that happened there. And I think so many artists, it's about the people that we meet, and just being around other artists is like such an honor and something that fuels us. And so it's not just the act of making or the work that we can make, but the people that end up being surrounding us.
Beautiful.
Yes.
To the right here, we have a video. I mean, we just have a still from it, but I'm wondering when you just mentioned your mother having, giving you, in a way, license to work at a very big scale. And here you have video, you've done performance, you've worked across media. When did you kind of start exploring those sort of beyond the 2D?
In terms of doing video, yeah, I think I went to college with Mika Rothenberg, and she was just such an incredible force in the school, and she was making video, and I feel like that I was inspired by her and the kind of narratives that she was able to tell. I would trace it there.
That's great, Virgil. You are working also very much in clay and beyond clay, and you will talk more about that home in clay that you have. But I'm wondering, for you, in terms of you've worked in fashion, you are working in multimedia. In a moment, we'll see a slide of your exhibition design for here, and I'm wondering. This is an exhibition shot from the painted project that we have here on view. But for you, what did it mean to be the youngest of a family of 6 that were ceramicists, clay makers?
Yeah, it was crazy just like listening to you guys saying like our surroundings when we're being raised. Like I had no idea it was art that we're creating on a daily basis. Because like I thought all my classmates like after school would come home and pick up clay and work with it. But being born into a family of potters on my mom, Severina Ortiz side of the family, that's all like I would wake up to was her working at the dining room table, and that was her studio. So like she never forced me and my siblings to pick up the clay, but she always offered it to us. She goes like, okay, this is the clay, mother, you guys are interested, come and sit down with me and try it. So me being the youngest of my siblings, I was the last one to fly the coop. So I had the most fun time with them because I had the best professors. I never went to school for anything. It's all like going to YouTube college or just figuring it out, right? So, but just going to the mountains and using the traditional methods and materials that Coche di Pueblo is known for. Like we would gather the whole family, my cousins, and go to the mountains and go dig the clay, being very respectful of where we get the clay from because it's been in our people's way of creating for who knows how long. So when we go to the specific place to visit the clay vein, we always feed the Earth Mother and ask permission, introduce ourselves, state our purpose, and then take the clay, but also ask for guidance and just prayers of how to continue this tradition. So that's how, these are funny images. I thought.
I was just going to ask if you could tell us what we're looking at.
I was really influenced by like a lot of the sci-fi movies. Like, so I think I was 6 or 7 when the first Star Wars came out, and like of course Star Trek and TV shows like Battlestar Galactica were always there. So you see all these like I learned how to make what Coche di people made were all based on social commentary. So like all these different types of characters, like depending on what the people that came around in our area, the more people like that the railroads brought. So entertainment popped up. So you see a bunch of different like opera singers or traveling circus sideshows, and you see all these different types of figurative pottery like this. And This style died out because the Victorian attitudes, when they found out that the Coach di Pueblo was making caricatures of them in clay. So they're like, stop doing that no more. You can't do that. So, but I never knew about this style of pottery until I was about 17. And then I first seen this Ben Wittick photo from the 1800s, and it depicted circus sideshows characters. And what was already in me, like being interested in fashion and like looking at how they were designed and dressed. And I challenged my family members that were making pottery at the time. I said, let's go recreate this image. So we all picked one piece to do it, and we had the resources to actually see these pieces down at a collector, a family friend, Robert Gallegos in Albuquerque. So my family had access to these pieces, and we tried to recreate not only the size, but just the meaning behind them. And this is what it turned out to be. And now this whole collection of 32 pieces resides in the permanent collection at Foundation Cartier in Paris.
Amazing. I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
It was exciting to do that with my family.
Wow, that's
Right.
I mean, and one of the things you're talking about is this sort of notion of a kind of artistic inheritance. And I remember when I first met you that you telling the story of that moment of recognition of kind of how people were saying, oh, you're making X kind of work, or your work looks a certain way, but you're realizing actually in the tradition of the Coach di Pueblo people, like that was, you didn't even know it.
Right.
And,
I mean,
yeah.
a lot of people say, oh, you're innovative. I'm like, I'm not even close. I'm just reviving what was lost in the 1800s. So like once, even Coach di Pueblo people don't know about this style. So when they're like, what are you making, like aliens? What are you making, all these different like characters? So then I'm able to educate them and show them photographs from the 1800s and say like, this is what our ancestors, our grandmothers, grandfathers were making. So then they're like, oh, now we get what you're doing. So I get like 100% support from our people, and I'm just feel that I'm here to make sure that the tradition doesn't die out, because it is a dying art form of using the age-old methods and materials of actually going to hand dig the clay, the paint, everything about it. Like we fire using aspen and cedar wood and cow manure, so it's just very old school material. So. To make interesting subjects like that, my prayer is to attract the younger generation and get them into learning not only our traditional ways of making them, but pushing them into using high fire clay or whatever they want to use.
And to see the possibilities. I mean, like that's a monumental work that you're working on there.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's just how you're pushing the limits of the medium. Paula, let me just advance. Here we have you in the studio. You were talking about printmaking, and I when I think about your work, I think about printmaking. I think about collage as really kind of foundational for you. And I'm wondering if you can talk about your choice of material and media and how that kind of allows you to grow from it.
Yeah, I appreciate that you zero in on those two, because I agree. I mean, even though I love painting, I work in video as well, my roots are definitely in printmaking. And I think it's the process, like how you have to work in reverse. My family is very academic. I grew up, my father taught at the University of Chicago, and I'm dyslexic, and so I felt as if there was something to where the way we work in print felt like it worked with my mind, like I'm naturally reversing things or, kind of confusing the orders. And so that felt like an affinity or home to me. And then collage, I just appreciate the way you can remix your own artwork and you can expand time, that nothing seems fixed when you can cut it up. It's often a little bit of a desperate process, like trying to get at something elemental or trying to formulate something in a way that feels true, that doesn't just feel like a linear process from point A to point B, that these things that maybe were created with no intention of being in the same piece can find bedfellows and a kind of synergy that is like a fuel to me, like that just keeps me working. And then the last thing I'll say is that started working in paper, but then shifted now to working in canvas, and muslin is really my jam, this like sort of cheap cotton. And it takes print well, but then can also be collaged fluidly. So that material shift discovery was important for my work.
And maybe you can describe what we're looking at here, which in a slide does not really come through. Can you describe how that is made, what we're really looking at in terms of the image?
I can. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, there's so many different pieces. So the center of the magnifying glass is a reduction woodcut. So it's sometimes called a suicide cut because you can never go back. You sort of like, once you cut away, that's it. And then you print on top of that. The hair is also a relief print that was printed, but then cut multiple times and then collaged to formulate that patterning. And then lastly, the sky is a monotype, but it also has a screen printed on it. So literally like a screen from a screen door, and rolled that up and printed it. And the first time I printed it, it was too light. And so it created this sort of hazy sky that you see there, which to me, at the time I was making that, there were forest fires in the area. And so it really reflected that environment and this sort of the catastrophe of the Anthropocene that we find ourselves in.
Thank you for that. I am very, very happy that this is in the museum's collection. You will not see it today in the exhibition that is downtown because we have just lent it for a show of Paula's work that will open at the Tank Teaching Museum next Friday, correct? So, but I'm very, very happy that it is now in our collection. And Daniel, coming to your work, when we, a couple of weeks ago, we met by Zoom, you mentioned how you carve all the time and how carving is so important to you. And I'm wondering if you can talk about the role of carving in your work and your thinking, and what we're looking at here as well.
Yes, I've always carved just like I've always drawn in the dirt, drawn on paper. I always I would carve with a knife when I was young, and I would carve the events and people around me in the small community where I lived, and that's somewhat, I still do that. And I use those carvings to understand, that environment around me. So I end up with lots of different images and objects carved in either wood or on print images. And those different pieces can intersect at any point. And through those, I gain some understanding when I interpret the meaning of those two images as they come together. Just as those three men standing there, if I were to rearrange them, their interpretation, their meaning, the meaning of what is being said would change. If I change the objects that they carry with them, that would change. And I expand that into all of my artwork, whereas I am building meaning and context using the objects and materials that are around me that I come in contact with every day. I'm seeking to embed power into everyday objects or pull the power from those everyday objects. In my work and in the carving. In the carving, you transform a material into another thing. You give it you add meaning to it by changing its shape, changing its form. But if it's a natural material that you're using, its natural form comes through. Its natural meaning is there, and the shapes that you've added is complementary. So I'm just basically building out ways for me to understand to interpret and understand the world.
We're looking here at an image of an installation that you presented alongside with Anita Sanchez, I believe.
Yes.
Can you talk about that installation in relation to what you're just describing?
Yes, that installation we called it Through This to That. And what you're looking at on the floor, on the ground there, are railroad tracks. They are. It was very important that they be actual iron, the actual material of railroad tracks. And the shape that they make is a cross. It's a cross that represents many things, 4 directions, the 4 stages of life, and upon it is a box that rolls along those tracks, and in that on that box there are 4 doors, and so there are 4 opportunities, 4 options for you that you can take. You take one, and it is about finding a way of moving, of getting to another place, getting to the future, really. But as you see the way that cross is made, there is no way for that vehicle to cross that intersection. It is an impossibility. So there must be another way to get to the future other than staying on this same track that you're on. You have to find another way.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And
So cool.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, Virgil, about your future-oriented work as well. We saw an image of one of your figures, when next to the very large one. But I just think about futurism and your different ways of thinking about and expressing this question of the future and how we get there. How can we get there? One of the things that is so striking about your work, Daniel, is the way in which you use motifs and narratives. Here are 3 paintings from your Malaga series. And here we have 2 other works. One of the things that is so striking to me about putting these 2 works together is how these figures are making the same gesture. And I'm wondering if you can say a word about, because I see this in all 3 of you, of this idea of recurring motifs. And for you, how do they function within your art? You, Daniel.
I was enjoying the patterns within your works and the patterns on the bodies of and faces, and also in the patterns of the fabrics, and those because I feel like those are communicating. They are not just what they are, but they are communicating. Communicating spiritual attitudes, spiritual values, and they are tying those patterns to a history. Mine, are usually inset to imply a narrative, to fill in a narrative. There's a figure, and that figure gives us a setting. But within that figure, there are many patterns and images that create a narrative. And depending on where you begin looking, that narrative may shift a little bit. But the objects within there are put there to create pattern. They're put there to be attractive and beautiful as well. So, but they do have a story to them, and I think that it's important that the patterns that I create be beautiful, because those are the things that impact us the most, that we absorb. So I feel like whether you know the story of Malaga Island or not, I feel like you can absorb some meaning just from looking at the images and patterns of these pieces.
Thank you for that. Virgil, this is just a little view of the installation here at the museum. And what you can see everybody here, the sort of pattern that is surrounding the works on which they are installed. And I'm wondering if you can talk about your choice of these patterns and your thinking around that installation and the role of motif in your own work.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to really bring in the patterns from Coche di Pueblo pottery that ties together all of the area where a bunch of these the artwork are from. So when we first started doing Zooms, I don't know how, we're just laughing earlier how many Zooms we did together to be able to make this happen. But to really choose some of these designs that were taken from historic pieces of pottery. Like the one that you're looking at here is called the res spine design, and it represents not only mountains, but also our kiva around ceremonial houses that we use, which our people are getting ready for our feast day dance, which is July 14th. So I'm gonna miss the first night of practice, but because I arrived back home in New Mexico on the 10th. But to get into the kivas, it symbolizes like when we're coming from the spirit world into the human world, you go down the step ladder into the kiva, and then also when we pass away, then that's the portal to back to the spirit world. So that's what that design. Yes, is a step ladder of the ceremonial houses.
And there you can kind of peek to the side. There's a kind of stepped design to the side.
Yeah, the step design is also like how a lot of traditional homes are painted. And if you go into a Pueblo home, a lot of the people have the step designs in it, and it also represents the kivas, the ceremonial houses, and a way to ascend into the next dimension, the higher level of not only in prayer, but just how we live and how we're taught. But it's all looking back. I don't know if you have any samples of like the kiva houses that I'm speaking of.
I don't have it here.
Okay, but it's like
later.
You'll recognize it immediately when you see it. But Juan and I, when we're talking about it, we wanted to really kind of bring the viewer into a Pueblo home, into a room, and to show what our, in a contemporary way, how our people paint their homes, and how, especially the ceremonial homes, they're very old. Who knows how old they are, but these are the types of design work that they have on the walls and on the floors too.
It's stunning, and you can all see it today. And just to provide some context for this exhibition, we have an incredible collection of artwork made in the American Southwest, and in particular, a Taos Society of Artists works, paintings, such as some that you see here to the sides of the object in the middle and the painting in the background of that object. And they are here, part of the Lunder collection. And what we wanted to do with this exhibition is to tell the story of the Taos Society of Artists, but to invite the Pueblo perspective in terms of what, because Pueblo people and Pueblo lands are the ones that are depicted really in those paintings. So what was the life of the people at that time? What was the story of those who were posing, for instance, for the Taos Society of Artists? What art is still being made and was being made at the time that the Taos Society of Artists were there, so that we can tell all of those art histories together. But in a way, it's so beautiful how these artists who were, going from Chicago or from the East Coast, or times from Germany, to finding themselves in Taos, a place that had a very, very long history of making and exchange and cultural exchange and a kind of coming together, how they found a home there in this place that preceded them. And so in a way, the installation creates that sort of broader context, that design that you've created.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this idea of patterning, I think, is so interesting, right? That because sometimes I feel insecure that like it's just decorative, you were saying, that it's meant to be beautiful. And I think that something that gets overlooked is that the act of doing it engenders the history and the stories that are in the pattern. Like it sort of privileges the maker in some ways, like in the making.
Which is, in a way, reminds me of what you were just saying in the carving. You are changing the original material, but the material is also coming forth with its own stories. And in the clay making, it's a very different process than carving, certainly. But that sort of ancestral kind of infusion into your work is also crucial, even as you're making incredibly futuristic pieces as well.
I think it's a bit of ancestral memory as well. Like, I mean, do you guys feel that? Because sometimes, like, I always tell people I don't feel it's my talent. It's just lent to me while I'm in this Earth's realm. But I better do something really good with it while I'm here. So it's like sometimes like I'll go to sleep and I may not remember the next morning what I dreamt of, but like 2 weeks later I was like, oh, everything falls into place. Like especially for the design of this exhibition, like all of a sudden it just came to me and just like really crystal clear. So I was like, okay, cool. How do I convey this to your team? But yeah, it's like sometimes it's just instilled in you, and like I often wonder where it comes from. But I also can hear my family's spirits that people have passed on, what their teachings were, and speaking through me, and like really just being a conduit of what I'm supposed to do here.
And one of the questions I have for all of you is, each of you work in a kind of expanded practice way. You make objects, but you also make in a wide range of media, you also make worlds, again, for other people. And I would like to turn to that for you, Virgil, that sort of working in fashion, working in design, working across all these kinds of realms. What does that do for you as an artist?
I just want to make sure that like to make it exciting for the next generation, because like I have the strength and the instilled in me to be able to teach them what our people have done in historic times. But to like just me reminiscing when I was a kid, I was like, okay, I learned how to do the geometrical designs, earth elements, painted onto our traditional pots or the figurative pottery. Then once I found out about these pieces that were from the 1800s that were all based on social commentary, that left the door wide open. So I was like, yes, I could do this. And like, and then now knowing that like, whatever our people, the more of the non-Indigenous people that were being brought into the area, they were being exposed to. So now, like if I go, like the middle image here, like I love Cirque du Soleil shows. So then like all of the pieces that from the 1800s our people were making replicas of what they seen in the traveling circus sideshows that came through our area. So I was like, okay, what would Cirque du Soleil shows look like in my costuming? So, and then also challenging myself of how to build a ceramic piece that would be able to hold without cracking like that, and just to really push it and like make it really look as light as possible, but it is ceramic. So it just all goes hand in hand of trying to excite the next generation, and really it's because all my work is based on educating globally about the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, the first American Revolution, but people don't call it that because of the genocide and the bloodshed that happened to the Pueblo people. So,
for those of you who are not familiar with that history, can you briefly explain?
Yeah, it's when the invaders first arrived into our area. It was pre-1680, but at that time there was like probably over 40 Pueblos in our area. So we welcomed them and nursed them back to health because of their long journey. But slowly more came, and they started taking over all the resources, our food, and then the rapes that started to happening, and imprisoning our people, and bringing Catholicism, and trying to change our ways of like, you cannot do your ceremonies anymore, cut your hair, stop doing your ways of life, and now we're gonna enslave you to build churches in every one of your pueblos. So once it started getting really bad, of like the murder started happening. So a leader by the name of Pope from Okeawinge Pueblo, which is just north of Santa Fe, devised a plan for a rebellion to take our lands back. And so he gathered all these some runners, and sent the runners from the northern pueblos to the southern pueblos carrying knotted cords, and instructed them to drop one cord at each of the war chiefs in each pueblo, and told them to untie one knot every morning. So when the last knot was untied, all the people in their pueblos stood up, rose up, and pushed out, revolted against the invaders. So that's how they finally got rid of them for 12 years, but then they came back in greater numbers, and now it's like living in peace. And that's like a prayer and a teaching, so that we learn from our past and not to repeat it. So that's why I bring in futurism into my work, is like telling a story of the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, but happening simultaneously in 3 different time dimensions: in the historic time, the present, and the future. So like all these characters you're seeing, they're coming from 2180 to the present time and historic times, collecting artwork, our language, our ceremonies, our songs, our design work, taking them to 2180, storing them, protecting them, so when we get to that timeline, all of our traditions, our language, our songs are still intact. So this is how I incorporate all these time dimensions, but also allows me to create cool characters like all what you see.
Yeah.
And that excites, again, like just not only the eye, but the interest of the next generation to kind of trick them into getting a history lesson, and until they don't know what they're looking at until they know the characters. And like now there's 19 groups of characters that I created that represent the 19 pueblos that are left in New Mexico today. So that's how it kind of operates, and you see how I'm combining the dimensions.
And you'll see elements of this story painted in different aspects of that installation. Thank you for that. Paula, this is your home. Tell us about what you've been making with Mike there.
So 16 years ago, I escaped from New York to Carrizozo, New Mexico, which is a town in high desert plains, Mescalero Apache territory. And we acquired 3 buildings, a hotel, an old Ford garage, and an old movie theater, all adobe. And there, my husband Mike and I engendered to completely collapse the distance between art and life. And the way we live daily is constantly making and remaking and curating within our spaces. We also co-run 2 programs, the Carrizozo Artist in Residency program that's welcomed 76 artists to the town since 2016. They generally stay for 1-month periods. And we also have an arts organization called Momazozo, and that's open on Fridays from 12 to 1. So if you ever find yourself within that window of opportunity, but
Talk about intentional
yes.
arrival.
Right, exactly. We've kept those hours since 2011. And even while we're out of town, we have people who are graciously holding the mantle for us. And there, people come. One thing we're doing pretty regularly is a glass smashing game. We have this sort of loading dock that we catapult glass into. There's no glass recycling in New Mexico, so it kind of is cathartic. It sort of loosens people up. At first they're like, no, I don't want to do that. And then they're like, is there any more glass around? We've also done tumbleweed races where you pick a tumbleweed and let it go. It's very windy in Carrizozo. And lastly, often printmaking. And I make and sew my own clothes, so oftentimes we're printing on T-shirts and inviting people like Daniel, you do, to use existing wood blocks to, kind of have some artistic clothing to walk away with.
And you're wearing one of your creations?
I am, yes. That's great.
And Daniel, you and Marcia Minter launched Indigo Arts Alliance, an amazing space here in Portland. Marcia's here with us, and it's really transformed so much of what is happening, not only here in the States, but also for artists who have come here. And I'm wondering how, well, first of all, tell us about, we were talking a little bit about this yesterday, about the impetus of starting the space, and then I'm interested in the relationship between your work as an artist and this space making for others.
Thank you. My work as an artist is tied, really deeply to, what we do at Indigo. Back when Marcia and I first got together, we would travel together to different places around the Caribbean, and we would connect with artists there of African descent in those places, people in the diaspora, and have conversations. And talking with them, we found that we were very, very, very much inspired, and we created artwork from a similar place and for a similar purpose. And also, even in Atlanta, a lot of the artists there, we would gather at a particular place. It was mostly, I guess, the Hammond's house, and sit there and talk about why we created artwork. That was always really important in these conversations, was why we do this. We knew that we could do this as a profession, but we also wanted each piece of work that we created to carry more information than just an identification of what the object is. We wanted there to be some type of personal, spiritual energy in this work, or some information in this work that could carry forward. And those are the conversations that the idea for Indigo grew out of. An idea of we didn't know what we would call it, or we didn't know how it would function at that time. And this is back in the early 90s. And but we knew that we wanted to build some place where artists from the diaspora could exchange ideas in a way that built on the reasons and purpose of the artwork, instead of dwelling on creating artwork to sell, or to be a product. We were interested in having a place where we could basically feed our spirits, that artists could do that and get. So in the different places we've lived, we've done that in small ways, in any kinds of ways that we could do, and a part of that has been, connecting to the to other social movements, and being there for people who are doing things in a political way. For instance, moved here, I got involved with people who were working on the Portland Freedom Trail, working on this movement of and telling the history of Black people here in Maine. So that is also a part of my art practice, is to continue this story and also do a service in a community where I live when I can. So we created Indigo Arts Alliance in 2019. Yes, we opened in 2019, and we were not opened a full year before we had to close. Before we had to close the shop, but by then we had connected to the creative community, a creative community in Portland, and a creative community around the country with different people who are in our circle of advisors. And our friend Nugent Smith, yes, Nugent Smith, was determined to have his residency, even though he could not be present, and created a way of doing a really effective residency virtually. And that, gave us, a sense that, no matter what, we really need to maintain these avenues of communication and conversation around creative thought for our own reasons.
So powerful. To close, I'm wondering, what is most important for you right now? Let's start with you.
For me, it's just to make sure that the Coche de Pueblo pottery ways of making it don't die out, and to educate globally about what happened to our people, because it's not taught in schools, it's not in our history books of the genocide that happened. It's been trying to be swept under the carpet. So using artwork to educate is very important to me, and that's been my whole life since I got into the gallery business, since I was probably 16.
For you, Daniel?
Well, it's really to make sure that artists are not alone in their thinking. that there are always other artists recognizing the works of other artists and the purposes of other artists. We get a lot of support from each other when we are together. When we are isolated, we tend to lose. I feel like we tend to lose our way if we are too isolated, because we must remember the reasons why we create the work. And so connecting artists is really important for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that for me, there's something, it's just as simple as like being present, and particularly like carving out some time to be present in this place that we live, our home, and thinking about art making not as you're saying, this kind of creation of discrete objects, but as a way, a vehicle to be present, and that has a kind of forward-moving, educational trajectory, that if we can find ourselves in the moment, true to what's happening, that has an amplifying effect. And once again, just Ashley Bryan was such an inspiration in that way. And so kind of taking that mantle and remembering him in that he was so present in the art and the poetry of his life.
And his community.
And his community.
As each of you are, yeah.
I think art is therapy. Like, it definitely saved my life. So, like, for meditating and stuff, when we have our hands directly with what we're creating, I'm always speaking to our spirits, our past family members, and it's therapy.
That's right.
With that, let's be present with each other today. Thank you so much to the three of you, Paula, Daniel, and Virgil, for this beautiful conversation. And I invite everybody to be in conversation with each other, with these artists, to be in our galleries, to just enjoy the day. We will sit down to enjoy lunch around 1 p.m. Make your way to the tent before that, because we have to register you. Thank you.